great progressions to be working on your squat at home. So for level 1, if you struggle to get your hips your hips level with your knees or just below, then this is what you should do to practice, is find a surface that is manageable for you at the moment. You're going to sit down and then stand back up again. So here, as you sit down, make sure you make contact with the surface, but you don't lose the engagement in your glutes, and you don't lose the engagement with your feet pushing into the floor, and then stand back up again. If you sit down here and relax, then you're not going to engage the muscles that you need to work on your squat positioning. Then as you get more used to the height that you've got, you then drop the height down to a more challenging position. So for example, got this cushion here, and it's a little bit lower than that table. So then I'd keep a little bit more engagement here, because if I sit down completely, it's just going to push it down a little bit lower. But then again, maybe that's where you need to be. And then as you come back up, push your feet into the ground, draw the belly in, and then snap the hips forwards. So if you're quite comfortable coming low into your squat, just want to go over a few positionings. So you want your feet slightly outside of your hip distance, more aligned with your shoulders. If you need to, you can go a little bit wider. But let's get used to this position first, because it's going to transfer over to a lot of different things. We want the toes to be pointing forwards or a little bit turned out. So maximum of like 12 degrees turned out. If you turn out more than that, it can feel a little bit more comfortable for the ankles initially, but it stops you from gaining as much torque as you can between your feet and the ground, and that's the connection that enables you to derive power and strength. So we're going to screw the feet into the floor. So it's almost like you're stamping down on the floor, because when you stamp, everything connects and everything engages. When you stamp, you generally don't find that your ankles roll in. So stamping gives yourself that gritty connection, that strong edge. Then you push your hips back first, or hips back, knees open. Hips back a little bit first, but they're pretty much simultaneous. You just want to make sure that you don't bend the knees and then sit back, because then the movement pattern isn't quite correct. So hips back, knees open. The knees open bit, it's really your pelvis opening and spreading wide. That gives you the space to actually come down. If you don't open here and you sit your hips back, you often find that you get constricted right in the front of your hip flexors, because your pelvis hasn't gone into a position where you can sit down further. So that might even be restricting your range of motion anyway. So pull the hip bones apart, which then you push outwards through the top of the inner thigh. It's not just the knees that are moving, that's often a very overused cue. So it's the inner thighs that open to enable you to sit down. Just want to make sure when you do that, you don't go onto the outer edge of the foot and lose connection from the ball of the foot and the inner edge of the heel. Because if you do, then again, you're not using everything you can correctly. Especially on the way back up, even though we want our glutes to be really working to help us lift off, if we don't push down through the base of the big toe and the inner edge of the heel as we come up, then we don't have this stability in the inner part of the leg, which is often then when one leg starts to wobble. So again, everything connected to the floor, which gives us that really screwed in, stable motion, where ankles, knees and hips are all level and in line. So what we can do to then push ourselves a bit further is we can weight it. So goblet squat, holding any weight, you can be creative. Dumbbell, kettlebell, child, animal. Hold that into the front of your chest. So it's resting onto the collarbone. You can hold it the other way up as well if you find that easier. I find it feels heavier this way than the other way, but again, it's entirely up to you. You can also hold it in a front rack position on one side and then alternate, or do one set on one side and then swap over, everything crap then, and then do it on the other side. So if you do this version, you just want to make sure that you're not leaning more to one side as you go down, and you want to make sure that you're not leaning more to one side on your hips and your legs as well. Lots of squat info for you. Enjoy.